Hello, everybody. I know a no intro rideshare rodeo, but it's not a rideshare rodeo edition. It's a reaction video. For those of you that saw a couple of years ago, Kim and I did a couple reaction videos for Legal Rideshare, or to Legal Rideshare's weekly podcast drop that they drop on Fridays called This Week in Rideshare. Um, I personally have known Bryant and Jared over at Legal Rideshare since before I've known any of you on YouTube, any of you, since before I started my podcast. I've known them since I was running my website only and just on Twitter. I met Bryant and Jared um, in 2017, and I've referred many people to them. I don't have a referral link. My referral link is simply go to legalrideshare.com. They will give you a free, Bryant will give you a free, chat. He'll talk to you for free and evaluate your situation. And these guys know the game better than anybody. That's why I like working with these guys. I love sending them business because they've been in this game almost as long as me. Now, I haven't done a reaction video to one of their videos in a while, and I saw the title of This Week in Rideshare. Now, when we used to do these, when we did a few of these reaction videos, we always made sure not to watch them first. Now, I watch their This Week in Rideshare whenever I can. It drops every Friday. Some weeks I might miss it just because I'm busy or whatever, but when I can, I watch the video. I watch their video. But so this one caught me because it said Waymo in Denver. They always have three topics. Waymo in Denver caught me. Now, I've not seen this yet, and we're going to do the reaction video today. We're going to do one to this Week in Rideshare, which dropped a couple days ago. But if you haven't subscribed, it's simple. It's at Legal Rideshare. The website is legalrideshare.com. If you are ever in an accident or anything as such, make sure that you reach out to them. It's free. They're just going to give you advice for free. Tell Bryant that Rodeo sent you. But with that said, let's jump in. I've not seen the video. I never do. And I'm always pretty straightforward. These guys know this. I don't always agree with them. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with them either, though. I just try and offer my perspective on it as a driver. And I texted Bryant even on Friday, I believe, who's the CEO and founder of Legal Rideshare in Chicago, but they can handle a case anywhere in the country. And I said, I think I'm going to do a reaction video to this week's. And he seemed excited. I know that he likes it. He always liked it when I did them. So here we go, guys. Let's bring it up. And we'll watch together. And I'll stop in between each of the three topics and we'll discuss it. It's not that long. Each topic's about 10 minutes. And not even maybe for the second two. But here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, September 12th, and this week, Waymo heads to Denver, Lyft hits up Atlanta, and the U.S. government is suing Uber. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back for yet another episode.
Yet another, and it feels like summer in Chicago. I'm lapping this up for right now. It's been cool, but now it's like a hot day today. It's pretty wild.
I've barely been outside today, but it looks gorgeous. I'm excited to start the weekend. And if it's as nice as you say it is, maybe I'll have a beverage in the backyard. I don't know.
Oh, that sounds amazing right now. I'm all for that. So yes, like I said, definitely eat it up while we can, because as Chicagoans know, it gets cold. And a big shout out to Kevin Hawthorne. He's watching us from Lakeland, Florida. He says hello from Lakeland, Florida. So, hey, Kevin, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the show. With that being said, we're going to jump into this week's stories. The AV race is obviously heating up and continuing to really heat up. Waymo has landed in Denver, and this is from Jalopnik, and they reported, quote, in both cities that they're discussing, Waymo will take the gradual rollout approach it's used in the past. So the first steps will be coordinating with local officials in the area that it intends to operate. Then its Jaguar, I-Pace, and Zeekr vehicles will begin scanning the area with human drivers. Then later, the vehicles will take control under close supervision and will only take passengers once Waymo is satisfied that its robo-taxis are fully ready for Denver and Seattle. Community response is mixed. According to Denver 7, some are genuinely interested in the technology and believe in its potentially safety benefits. However, taxi and rideshare drivers are concerned about losing their jobs to automated taxis like Waymo. Bryant, this is interesting. You know, again, a very different approach than, let's say, what Tesla's doing. It's also interesting to see how the community is handling it. But kind of a mixed response, which we have seen community-wise excitement, slight hesitation, and obviously concern for drivers out there who make a living doing rideshare. So again, just more developments, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's interesting to watch this play out across the country and how different communities are responding. Every time we see a new city take on this sort of autonomous vehicle and AV rideshare type situation, it makes me think back to when Uber and Lyft came to town a decade plus ago, and how communities responded then and what they can learn from that experience. So way back when Uber and Lyft first started, communities really didn't have much to say. The governments let the companies roll in. There were no regulations. Citizens were kind of ambivalent because they didn't really understand exactly, how this technology was going to change their communities. And because of that ambivalence from both the community and the local government, Uber and Lyft basically got to do whatever they wanted, and the community had to, pay the price. They were on the defensive from the beginning. So I like the fact that we're having these conversations, that Denver local government, Denver's local community are talking about their concerns, or are talking about their excitement. It goes both ways. But what I'm hoping is that we have all learned from the fact that we need to step up early, and we need to set the boundaries and set the rules and regulations that we want these companies to abide by, rather than the other way around. So as Denver accepts autonomous vehicles and robo-taxis onto its city streets, I hope they're thinking really hard about how they want to have that technology rolled out, how they want to regulate it, how those regulations are going to be enforced, how safety is going to be dealt with, how insurance is going to be dealt with. These are just all factors that need to be addressed early and often. I'm not really sure whether Denver is having that kind of in-depth dialogue, but hopefully these concerns that are getting raised early lead to action, so that there is regulation early on, rather than everybody's back on their heels a year or two from now when the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, it does feel, I second what you say. It does feel a lot more, even though it seems very quick as far as the development, there seems to be a process this time. I wasn't heavily involved in rideshare when it first came out, in the late 2010s. I was a consumer, but it felt like it went from zero to all of a sudden there were cars that no one knew what they even did and what the safety was. And it was kind of crazy. It's sort of like that, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me sort of situation. And I think, as you pointed out, I think the cities now are much more ready to pounce on it and go, look, we're not just going to let another company disrupt transportation. We did that once, and look where it ended us. And I will say, in Waymo's defense, again, compared to some of the other AV startups, they are very methodical on their approach to cities. It's a multi-step process to get it from the fact of them even choosing a city, testing the city, having a driver in the car, then testing if they're are able to graduate from that to eventually a non-person supervising AV vehicle. So I give them a lot of credit for that, because they are doing it arguably by the book. Now, as you pointed out, we don't know how much they're talking to authorities and the governments about it, but at least it feels like they're trying to really do this an efficient way and not a destructive way.
Yeah, I would agree that they are taking steps, but I want the community to be deciding the rules. And you say they're playing by the book. Well, it's the book that they wrote. So
Right.
when there's opportunities to cut corners, or when there's a real race for market share or a real race for profits, if it's their rule book that they're abiding by, it's going to be much easier for them to break those rules. I would like the cities to have established the rules, or even the state governments to establish those rules, so that when companies try to break them, there's actually teeth in the enforcement, and there's repercussions for a lack of following them. So adherence matters, and we don't want the billion-dollar companies who stand to profit a lot or lose a lot to be deciding which rules apply, when they apply, and whether they're going to be enforced.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to point out that, there's still, things are heating up, but there still isn't that intense competition yet. A lot of these companies are sort of dabbling in the market. I think once it becomes really who's going to win, the rule book's being thrown out, and everyone's going to go for the jugular. I can't imagine it's not, because it's very competitive and a multi-billion-dollar industry. And like you said, when that happens, let's hope there's teeth. And it leads us to our second story, which again we'll cover briefly.
Oops, sorry about that, guys. Here we are. I absolutely have some responses to that. You guys know me. A few things were said there. I was taking some notes on the side. So let's jump in here. So first of all, they're talking about Waymo. They're talking, where have we seen Waymos? California. We've seen them in San Francisco for years, causing lots of trouble. Governor Newsom put them in. The mayor, the fire department, the police department, everybody wants them gone. And they're in LA. They're in Arizona. They're now in Atlanta. They're in Dallas. They're in Austin, and they're gonna launch a few in Philly, a few in Seattle, and a few in Denver here. Denver's gonna be a good testing market, but a lot of you get to see because it's not as weather prone as people think. We're more of a desert. It's the mountains just to the side of us, but we do get enough of freezing where the LiDAR will die. But let's address some major issues that I do feel these gentlemen overlooked, or I know Bryant and Jared very well. I know that Bryant speaks from an attorney point of view. So let's speak from a driver point of view. First of all, in California and Arizona, I'm not sure about the newer states, but I think it's the same thing. But in California and Arizona, Waymos cannot be ticketed. There was a 20-month period between 2022 and 2024 where 202 accidents happened that involved Waymo. Out of those 202, 73 were the fault of Waymo. How many tickets were written to Waymo? 0. How many of those 73 incidents where they were at fault did the police officer write in their report that the Waymo was at fault? 73, 100%. There are even incidents where Waymos stopped in the middle of intersections, caused chaos, took off during a bad timing of lights, and then other cars crashed and the Waymo kept going. So we have incidents that might not even be documented that was the responsibility of the Waymo. But you can't ticket in California or Arizona a vehicle that has no driver. So of the 202 incidents, 73 were the fault of Waymo, and 0 tickets were written. And if you go and look into the police records, which a lot of deep dives have done, and I've talked about multiple times on here, the last time being, I think it was episode 485 of the podcast. I had Levi Spires on. We went through autonomous. Approximately 70% of all incidents involving Waymo are completely redacted. You cannot find any of the information. we've all seen, or maybe you haven't, but there's lots of videos on YouTube where the police officer pulls a Waymo over. They pull over into the wrong lanes. They pull over into oncoming traffic. They're not ready. They're not road ready. They're not road ready at all. And they're very, I don't want to say they're very dangerous, but they're not. Look, when you are reporting to your, I mean, remember that Waymo is owned by Google. Google is a multi-trillion-dollar company. I mean, it outperformed, in terms of money, it outperforms Uber by 100 times. So it's Google Alphabet. So they have unlimited resource to throw at this. But the fact that the statistics that we get from cities like this show, look at our Waymos operate perfectly. There's no accidents that are our fault. There were 73 in those 2 years, and yet you reported it as 0 to your investors. Complete lies, deceit, everything we're used to in the gig economy. Insurance is a huge problem because these are self-insured. Insurance companies can't handle Waymos because I've had State Farm and other insurance agents on the podcast, and I've spoke with them off air too. And they've always said it's an all or nothing game. Again, I would refer you to the episode I did with Levi Spires on autonomous, because we really went through the guts of it. And what I've always found, and I can speak for Colorado because I live here, our government is very upside down and corrupt. I mean, extremely. All the wrong people are in place. It doesn't matter if you're left, right, center, wherever you are. The people running the state of Colorado are upside down in their thinking. See it all the time. It's just crazy what we do. I know a lot of cities can feel my pain on this one. But it seems like the cities that are willing to accept huge briefcases of cash are the ones letting Waymo in. Because under no circumstances should a vehicle operating between 70 and 80% efficiency with its parts be allowed to drive on city streets with human drivers. Remember that autonomous learns from humans just as it learns from road conditions and weather. So if it's learning from humans, I've always said this, and I'm going to say it again. I'm going to put the nail in the coffin on this one. Why don't they create a city in the desert first? Because, again, weather is where they don't perform well. That's what they were talking about, is that they might not perform as well in the weather. Make a city in the desert and have all the autonomous companies go there and all operate together with no people. Fake cities, pop-up people that come out of the street. See how they react to that. Don't live test with us humans. And that's a step beyond the fact that you're taking away the jobs of drivers. Now, before we do move into the next segment, I also want to put the double nail in the coffin and say, do we know the cost of a Waymo? We do. They use the Jaguar I, and they cost, once you get the car, 80 to 100 grand, and then you put the full AV kit in it, which is about 130 to 150. Let's call it about 225,000. Then you have to have a person who watches the vehicle, a monitoring person who's a W-2. You have to have cleanup and fixing and maintenance. Installation is like another 70,000. Let's just call it 300 there. Then you have to have the W-2 employee. Then what if somebody pukes in it? What if the next passenger leaves a needle in it and then a baby and a mom get in? We know that in San Francisco, one of the biggest issues with it is sex, people having sex in the Waymos. There are so many issues that in my book, people are looking more to take advantage of these than anything else because there's not a driver. It's not about safety. It's about, hey, let's have some fun in the Waymo. And that's not going to fly once. We need to get something down on the books that says, hey, these vehicles can be ticketed, and something that says, hey, the amount of tickets that you get reduces the amount of cars you can be testing at the very minimal. The fact that they just keep lying to the public and saying, look, we have a perfect record. No, you don't. And any police officer in any state or city where they've operated, take them to the side and ask them, have you ever had an issue with a Waymo? They will say yes. They will say, absolutely, we hate Waymos, we hate Cruise, we hate these companies. They're not ready. They're not ready. The company is pretending like they're ready by paying off people, but they're not ready. And self-insurance is a joke because that means their product is a joke and they can't get any insurance companies to back them up. Now, I've heard the claim, and maybe I'll get a response from these guys over there. I think I even sent it to Bryant a while ago, that becomes, if you, the driver, and this is even worse, gets struck by a Waymo, that you are going to be put in the middle of a product liability or a product malfunction case, which is extremely hard to prove. Now you need to prove that the product, the Waymo car that had no driver in it, was defective. And from what I've seen, that's next to impossible. And most people don't have the money. And even lawyers won't take it on because they have a way of doing math to see if it's worth taking on the case. And from what I've heard, it's nothing against people who would be injured by them, but the amount of money and resource they'd have to put into proving this product to be wrong, just everything, no, you should not be operating, would cost too much up front. So I know we will get to AV one day. Autonomous will be here one day. I mean, like, we can all say that. Maybe it won't be 100%. Insurance companies seem to say it needs to be 100 or 0 for them to be involved. But maybe new insurance companies will pop up or whatever. Maybe it'll be 50-50. We will get there. The problem is people losing white-collar jobs to AI, like 30 to 50% of entry-level jobs, will happen in the next 2 years. Autonomous vehicles will not be ruling the road in the next 2 years. In fact, the white-collar job people who can't get jobs out of college will be the ones still driving rideshare when they want to get a white-collar job, because there still won't be autonomous. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's always been smoke and mirrors. And even when it does seem like it's becoming more and more and more prevalent, like it is now, it's still smoke and mirrors. Dig deep, people. And again, look at the cities they're in. Look at the people running those cities, and you will find major corruption, or the states. So, I mean, not that you wouldn't in any city. But that's a tough one for me, because I am not only completely against these, and it's not just about the drivers. I'm all for technology if we're not moving it too quickly or trying to shove it down people's throats. When they come to new cities, they lie. They send briefcases of money, but they lie. So let's move on to the next piece before I keep ranting about it. And let's see what else they got here today.
Briefly, but on the other side of this is Lyft's robotaxis now. And so they have just entered the Atlanta market, and Reuters covered the story, and they said, Lyft and the autonomous vehicle startup May Mobility, because they've partnered with them, will launch a pilot robotaxi service in Atlanta starting from Wednesday. So that was 2 days ago. Customers using the standard Lyft app will be able to hail the Toyota Sienna minivans that are retrofitted by May Mobility in and around Midtown Atlanta, with fares comparable to regular rides. Again, the companies will start with a small fleet with trained in-vehicle operators on board to answer questions and take control if needed. Now, they did say, Bryant, that they're starting with a dozen cars, but they are looking to pretty quickly get into the hundreds and thousands. And it's a different game. That's a totally different game then.
It is. And everything we just talked about in the prior segment, I think, applies to what Lyft is doing. And I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but there needs to be rules, there needs to be regulations. And we've already seen Lyft, just like Uber, storm into communities and do things the way that they want to do them, without any sort of repercussion or without any sort of consideration as to what's best for the city, the workers, the community itself. With this story, it just switching gears a little bit, I'm reading this to see that Lyft is trying to catch up with Uber. Uber has been putting out autonomous vehicles for some time now with partnerships. This has been a major priority for Uber for a long time. And I think that once again, we're seeing Lyft try to play catch up and go through this process to try to put a product on the streets that we're seeing the community members want to use. So Lyft always seems to be a little bit behind, and right now we're seeing them trying to claw their way back into the market as they see rideshare generally moving towards AVs and robo taxis. I don't think cars with drivers in terms of rideshare is going to be totally gone really ever, or at least not for decades. I think there's always going to be a market to have a driver in the car for some members of the community. But I also think that the younger users in the vast majority of the market share will move towards AVs sooner than later. So if Lyft is the only company out there who's just putting drivers on the road and doesn't have an autonomous arm, they're going to fall behind the market very quickly. So I think this is an effort to try to maintain the market share that it has and not fall too far behind.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel like catch up, and yeah, we don't need to weigh on this too much. It's a lot of what you said before. Again, these are these pieces, as I said a few minutes ago. It's like, hey, Lyft is in Atlanta, Waymo's in Colorado, but what happens when they're all fighting the same city? I think that's when things are going to start getting really intense, when it becomes, okay, there's 3 or 4 players, someone has to win this market. And we're not there yet because it's so new, and so there's everyone's sort of plucking cities. It almost feels like a command and conquer video game right now. Like they're plotting their cities to start the bases, but eventually they're going to collide, and I think that's when we're going to start seeing some really crazy stories. But
I think that's right. It's going to be a vicious fight.
yes, we're not there yet, but I will say this, which will transition to our final story. We seem to be on the pulse of things on this show, and it makes me very
Okay. I'm glad that Bryant brought up a couple things in there, and I think he kind of touched on them on the first one too. First of all, let me clarify. Lyft did just launch their first autonomous city as Atlanta, but guess what, guys? Waymo's already there, so they're not picking and choosing cities. Let's be honest. Lyft didn't even. They tried in 2022. 2 years after, 2 years too late, and their attempt was weak. It's not even worth mentioning because I remember we talked about it on Driver Nation, the trucking radio station show that I used to do with Tom Kelly for years. That's when this happened, was that Lyft didn't even pick up food delivery during the pandemic. When the stay-at-home orders and the CARES Act and everything went into place and rideshare died in one day and food delivery took off, Lyft just allowed its platform to die for a year or two. And then they were like, maybe we should try food. And the food company they were trying to team up with wasn't a Grubhub or a DoorDash or an Uber Eats. They were just, I don't know. It never even launched. I mean, why, when rideshare went from, if you're calling it like, this is your 100% average on year, when it went to like 5% for Lyft for a year and a half, 2 years, then started creeping back up. Why didn't you try something? There's a Mitch Hedberg joke that says, Pringles is a super cool company. They wanted to be a tennis ball company. And they had all the canisters. And the day the tennis balls showed up, or were supposed to show up, a bunch of potatoes showed up. And being that Pringles is a cool company, they said, screw it, cut them up. And they just went with potato chips instead. I guess my point there is adapt. Lyft doesn't know how to do that. Lyft knows how to copy a little bit, but they've always been little brother. And I will say that, again, I've known Bryant and Jared since 2017, maybe 2016. Lyft used to be on their own, and they used to have their own path. And it seemed a lot better. When I was doing the most rideshare I did, I preferred Lyft until the point when I remember it like it was around 2017. They completely switched and said, screw it, follow everything Uber does and be little sister. And at that point, it became, did you pay? The pay's worse. And I know some markets might argue that point. But in the end, one of the points that Bryant made here was rules and regulations. The problem there is, I go back to my same other answer that, look, it's bad players in your government that are allowing live testing in big cities of autonomous vehicles. I mean, we know that in in some cities there has to be a driver in the car. Or in New York City. New York City is the perfect example. I won't go through it because there's like 10 different things they have to meet. Right now, New York City is allowed to test 8 Waymos in the 5 boroughs, and it has a safety driver, an engineer up front, and they're not allowed to take passengers. To me, that's just plotting and mapping and selling off that data. So is Waymo going to be the player when autonomous does hit hard in 15 years ish, 10, 15 years, when they really, and I'm not saying take over, but start really entering the field? No, I feel like they're kind of the engineers building the first building, and everybody else is going to work off that architecture. But the rules and regulations go out the window when the briefcases of money come in. We've seen this with Uber and other countries on just the regular rideshare. They've been kicked out of Spain 3 times. And every time, what do? They just show up more. They show up again with bigger briefcases, more briefcases, and bigger bills in those briefcases to allow them to operate. It's a very shady deal. It's done corruptly. But and here's where I'll point that out. When Bryant mentioned rules and regulations, I really appreciate him saying that, because the rules and regulations are key, because people are never brought into this conversation. How do I know about Waymo coming to Denver? Because I follow this stuff every day. When he's saying that, there's mixed feelings on it. If I go ask 100 people in Denver, did you know Waymo is coming to Denver? My guess is well over 90, and that means 95 plus, in my opinion, would say I had no idea Waymo is coming there. And half would even say, what's Waymo? But I know that over 90 would say, what? Nobody ever knows about this stuff. The government brings them in. They do it illegally. They make it seem safe. It's not safe. They know it's not safe. The LiDAR, for example, operates at 80% efficiency. The LiDAR has a lifespan of, what is it? The LiDAR has a lifespan of 2 to 3 years in the best of weather conditions, like a Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, dirt and stuff gets on them. But when they bring them up here, that lifespan will shrink. LiDARs on a Waymo cost $70,000. That is the equivalent of 2 vehicles. So when we're talking about 400,000 or 500,000 for autonomous vehicles, please. I mean, you can't be doing $3 no-tip rides in a $500,000 vehicle. I understand that, again, I mentioned Google is a multi-trillion-dollar company. So they can afford to waste a little bit on the testing and engineering and do this for some years. But if something doesn't catch quicker than it is at all, they're definitely operating at a loss. I've heard the people say, yeah, but those are vehicles that accept every trip. Sure. But if every trip is $3 or $4, what's the point? You're never going to pay off the vehicle. And I understand they'll find a way to shrink that cost, but you can't shrink it too much at this moment, not for a long time. And then you have, transit authority and other things stepping in going, whoa. You can't, no autonomous vehicles are allowed at airports. Does everybody know that? They're not even allowed to go to the airports. Why is that? That's because the airports are smarter and they said no. So I do like what Brian said about rules and regulations. I do think that the cities and states allowing it need to be held more accountable, because to date, they're not. And even, like I said, Gavin Newsom allowing San Francisco is a perfect example. San Francisco fire chiefs, police chiefs, and the mayor and other city officials all want them gone. They don't want to have a discussion about it. They want them gone from the city. Look up how many fire trucks have had to hit a Cruise or Waymo vehicle. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, and even after it happens, they understand that they need to reprogram this and fix it, but they use the where the vehicles would come out at fire stations to park in front of. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. It's like a game is going on for these people while they're playing with real people's lives. That's how I see it. So the rules and regulations, I agree with Bryant. But the problem is they're not being followed, and they're not involving the people of the communities in which they're hurting. So let's move on to this last one. By the way, Bryant and Jared, I love you.
Very proud because I believe just last week or the week before, we were discussing the issue with disabled passengers getting rides. Well, I don't know if the U.S. government watched our podcast or not, but they are suing Uber for discrimination over disabled passengers. And this is from The Guardian. And they reported, quote, the U.S. government sued Uber on Thursday, accusing the ride-sharing company of violating federal law by discriminating against passengers with disabilities. In a complaint filed in San Fran federal court, the U.S. Department of Justice said Uber drivers routinely refuse to serve riders with disabilities, including people who travel with service animals or stowable wheelchairs. The department also said Uber and its drivers illegally charge cleaning fees for service animals and cancellation fees to riders who are denied service, and some drivers also allegedly insult and demean people with disabilities or refuse reasonable requests such as letting impaired passengers sit in the front seat. So Bryant, like I said, we had just talked about this. That was a story that was local to Chicago about a woman who was struggling to get a ride. I don't know if that hit the radar of the U.S. government, but they're going after Uber. They're doing it.
You know what? I would be shocked if the government's not watching This Week in Rideshare.
Right? We know you are.
Sure, I'm sure that's where they got this information. But no, this is a major story. And I think what we can all take away from this is that there needs to be accommodations made for disabled passengers. That is federal law. It's state law in many circumstances as well. And ultimately what this comes down to is the rideshare companies doing a poor job of educating its workforce as to what's required. Most people are not well versed in the ADA. Most people don't know what's required in terms of transportation when you're dealing with individuals who have certain needs. And that falls on the corporations to make this information readily available and ensure that disabled passengers are getting the rides that they need, that they deserve, and that they're entitled to. Hearing things like, charging cleanup fees for animals that are in the vehicle for disabled passengers, or not letting certain passengers sit in the front seat. I mean, from a purely human perspective, like I can understand if a driver doesn't totally understand or consider that the person needs that service animal, or understand why that person wants to sit in the front seat. That driver needs to be made aware that the person who is making the ride request, if they're claiming a disability, they need to take that disability seriously. They need to give the benefit of the doubt. And you don't get cleanup fees for service animals. You have to make accommodations like let the person sit in the front seat. And I think that most drivers are compassionate people. And if they, one, understood the needs of the person who was getting in their car, and two, understood the laws, they would absolutely comply. So many of these issues are not based on a unwillingness to comply with the law or any sort of malfeasance on the part of the drivers. It's the company's failure to properly educate and properly require compliance with laws that they should know well, and that should be one of their top priorities to enforce.
Yeah, and hopefully, out of this suit comes sort of those demands and requirements, right? Like you said, most people are good people. They want to do the right thing. There's a lack of education here, and they're also, these drivers are under such immense stress on time, on the next ride, on anything. I think a lot of that plays into this. And so when you throw a wrench in what they're supposed to be doing, it really becomes a situation that no one knows what's right. They get frustrated. They cancel the rides. So I think that's a really good point on that. But we will see. I don't, it says they just filed it, but I do not know to what extent and where it's going to go from here. But I'm sure we will be updating this later. But that being said, that is the stories for this week. And as always, Brian.
Okay, before I let Bryant take the last word and walk us out of here, as he always does on that podcast, I do want to weigh in on that. Applause to those guys for bringing it up, because the ADA thing is a huge thing. As you guys know, many months ago, I got in contact with the ADA myself, actually about 6-7 months ago. I'm still in touch with them, and we are still working on things. It's like the legislation, people. Things just don't move at the rapid pace everybody wants them to, but we're working on it. And actually, hearing them talk about it just refreshed my memory that it's been a minute since I've spoken with the people I'm in contact with. And I'm going to actually send an email out today, right after this, because I was talking to them on the behalf of the delivery drivers not getting full transparency who have disabilities. So people doing delivery work who have disabilities, who don't see full transparency that they're going to need to go up 3 flights of stairs, that the elevator's broken, this, that, the other, that it's 10 cases of water. I mean, again, another it wasn't to my initial reason for contacting the ADA, which is what I did. I reached out and contacted them myself. But my initial reason wasn't, it was based on the non-transparency factor, which still needs to be fixed. And I still argue it wouldn't hurt the companies, and actually with the cost of data might even help them. But yeah, what he is saying is correct, guys. I've been through this many times myself. You have to allow service animals into your vehicles as on rideshare. You do. And by the way, I used to, and I'll be honest, I'll throw myself in there with probably many of you. Service animals do not need to wear a service animal vest. They do not need to carry any kind of certification. And quite often it's upset me because I've seen people abuse the privilege. I've seen people, and again, like I'm going to bring up something here that I'm sure in some cases applies, but I'm sure many people take advantage of this. In fact, in my own experience, I feel like I've seen it many times, is emotional support animals. People bring them in and they're like, it's a service animal, it's emotional support. Okay, I'm not allowed to ask you. I'm not allowed to check you. You could get me deactivated if I do ask you. So be very careful with the service animal thing. But I've picked up people from, I live in Denver. I know where we take our dogs to swim. I've picked up people who are like my age and they're like, it's a service animal and it's wet. They towel dried it and whatnot. But if you have a dog, I've had dogs my whole life, you know that even after a towel dry and being in the sun for a little bit, it's still wet dog. Now your car smells like wet dog. People don't want to ride in a car with wet dog. That is something you need to go then deal with and take time off. So where is that line? I'm not really sure. I'm with these guys on that one. I'm lost. I really, that's why I asked the ADA about the delivery transparency, because I feel like, man, you guys need to step in here, because people just abuse everything. And a last thing about it, I'll even mention that a year or two ago, I saw it happens on flights too. I saw somebody took a flight and they're emotional. No joke, you guys. You'll have to Google it. And if you can't find it, leave it in the comments below. But there was an emotional support peacock on an airplane. Come on. And I'm sorry to the ADA. I'm sorry to people with disabilities who may have emotional support peacocks, but come on. I don't know. That one seems a little far-fetched for me, but I remember this happening, and I really don't know where to go with that one. But as Jared was saying, we're going to let Bryant have the final word, as he always does, kind of like a Springer's last thoughts. Again, these guys are the best. If you guys have any questions legally, reach out to them, legalrideshare.com. They really are great guys. I've spoken with them off lives, on the phone. Everybody I've ever referred to them, Bryant has given a half hour to at least give you a consultation and tell you what he thinks about your situation. So if you're in an accident, if you're hurt, if something happened to your car, anything of the sorts, while you're doing gig work, if anything happens to you, reach out to these guys, because yes, they're in Chicago, but they can represent you anywhere. And also, they've been doing this longer than any other company out there. There's other companies now starting to do what they're doing, but nobody has the 10 plus year experience that Legal Rideshare does. These guys were the originators. They're as old as me being around. But listen, guys, we're going to let him walk us out of here. Again, Legal Rideshare, check it out. It really is a great resource. And everybody I've ever referred who's called has emailed me back or called me back or texted me back and said, thank you. Yeah, he took the time. He talked to me. So I know for a fact, I've gotten the feedback after the fact that they do reach out. So hopefully everybody in the live chat is leaving comments, and leave your comments or questions for these guys below, and I'll get it to these guys, or I'll make sure that they come over here and see them and reply to a comment. One way or the other, I will make sure that any comments made for Legal Rideshare on this video, in the live of this video, while it's live, any of that stuff, I will make sure it gets to them, or that they're aware of the comments, and I'll ask them to respond themselves. So we'll get you answers. But great guys, and they're who I'd recommend. They would be my first call, and I live in Colorado. I know attorneys in Colorado. I live in Colorado, but yet if I had anything going on with rideshare or while doing gig work, my first call would be to these guys. Fact. LegalRideshare.com, guys. And with that, let's let and oh, by the way, last thing. Bryant has been on this podcast a handful of times. Thank you, Bryant, as always. Always a great guest, always very insightful. The next time I want Jared. Jared, I'm looking for you, buddy. I want you on the Rideshare Rodeo podcast. You and I need to have a very good discussion, and I mean it in the best of ways. You've never been on. It's time. I'm over 500 episodes now. I'm qualified. All right, guys. Here we go with Bryant signing us off.
I'll give you a final say before we head into the weekend.
Yeah, we always remind everybody that Legal Rideshare is ready and available to offer free consultations should you ever find yourself in an accident or injured on the job. We represent drivers, we represent passengers, we represent victims, anybody who is injured in the scope of rideshare or gig work. We can help you recover things like pain and suffering, lost wages, the cost of medical treatment, and any other damage that you sustain. We remind everybody that time is of the essence. These cases do not get better when time passes. So please reach out to us as soon as you can. Consultations are always free, and all of our contact information is on our website, legalrideshare.com.
Thank you, Bryant. And as I like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.
From city streets to country lanes, rideshare rodeo eases pains, sharing wisdom bit by bit, turning hustle into wit. 3 years strong, his voice rides high, guiding gig folk far and nigh. Cheers to Steve, let's raise a toast, rideshare rodeo coast to coast. He's the cowboy of the rides, navigating daily tides. With his guidance we feel free, rolling on eternally. Through each podcast, night and day, Steve lights up the winding way. Gigs feel less like work alone, 'cause his tips have sure shown. 3 years strong, his voice rides high, guiding gig folk far and nigh. Cheers to Steve, let's raise a toast, rideshare rodeo coast to coast. He's the cowboy of the rides, navigating daily tides. With his guidance we feel free, rolling on eternally. Through each podcast, night and day, Steve lights up the winding way. gigs feel less like work alone, 'cause his tips have surely shown. 3 years strong, his voice rides high, guiding gig folk far and nigh. Cheers to Steve, let's raise a toast, the Rideshare Rodeo coast to coast. Rideshare